Howdy everyone, this is Ari Danish with Side Effects, and I just wanted to give you a quick tip. In the last couple of weeks, a new option in top geometry has been added that is kind of useful. So I just want to take you through the new parameter options and show you how it works. So I'm sure all of us have done a simple thing like this, where we take a box, and what we want to do is create a bunch of flat rocks to use later. So just to get you through the flat rock setup, for those who are beginners, we have an ISO offset to make a cloud. We scatter some points in that cloud, and then we do a Voronoi fracture. And there's our classic Voronoi fracture. And then just to make it easier to see and visualize, I did an exploded view so we can see the individual rocks. And then we have two options. We could just use the rocks as is, really small and lightweight, or we can go and divide them and put a mountaintop and so forth. But that's not really the point of this quick tip. Then what you want to do is you want to store these rocks in the library for later use. And traditionally what you would have to do, right, to make it useful, is you would have to take each of these elements here, each of these rocks, and move them to the center, the world axis 0, 0, 0, and then save them to disk. That way, when you recall them for your project later, they're all centralized and you can do the transforms correctly to wherever you scattered and copied the points. So, traditionally what you would do is set up a for loop. And the for loop would look something like this. You would do a connectivity SOP, and you give it a primitive connectivity, and you give it an attribute. Probably you'll be lazy and just call it class, which is the default, but for this tutorial I changed it to rock. Then in the for loop, you would have it fetch piece or points, and then for each end would be set to primitives, and then the attribute would be rock also. Then in your transform, you would send it to $max and $zmax to move each point to the center. And then to output it, you probably inline, probably one of my least favorite SOPs, to a geometry file. And I would want to make each rock have a unique name. So to do that, I would have to go back into my for each and click on the create meta import node. And it would drop down this new node. And I just renamed it rock number. And that way, in the file cache to when I have my geometry file string, I could also say detail with a back quote beforehand to evaluate it. Find the node called rock number. Find what iteration of the loop it is. So what rock number do we want to save? And then save it out. So I'm sure all of you have done this many times. But in the last couple of weeks, there's been a change to PDG that allows you to do this within a topnet. And so that's really what I wanted to demonstrate. Would I use this, I should say? If it's a low number of rocks, no. For loops are more efficient. But if you are having thousands and thousands of rocks to save or pieces to save, then maybe, a top geometry would be useful. And hey, it looks so much nicer to set up. So what you would do is you drop down a top geometry, and you would dive inside. And let me show you what you probably would have thought to do, which is the wrong way, is you would do a geometry import, right? And you would say upstream output file. No, you would set this to SOP node. And then the SOP path would be, I'll just copy and paste it, the op input path, boom, 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 right here. So that you now have the node that's pointing above the top network to grab the geometry from. And then you would say evaluation time is work item frame. Fine. And here's the key things. You would say copy from class. This is what would go by default in your head. I want to copy the primitive, and the primitive's attribute is named rock. And then what you do, so now you made these buckets for each rock attribute, you would do a partition by attribute. Okay? And that attribute name would be obviously rock. That makes sense. The problem is with the geometry import, it's going to import every single polygon. So if I made this a high quality rock with, probably thousands of polys per each, you could end up having tens of thousands, if not millions, of work items and crash the system by doing it this way. Because again, you're working on a per polygon basis. So a couple of weeks ago, a new parameter option was brought into geometry import, or I should say written for the geometry import. And what you're going to do now is the same thing. The default, the SOP node, pointing to the node above it. And then you are going to say class from copy primitive, and copy in all the default attributes, which is probably what you want to do anyway, so I don't have to specify rock here. But then where it says create work item 4, right, in the wrong way, we set each element in a specified group because we didn't care, because we were going to use a partition by attribute. But now there's a new option called piece attribute values. And when you do that and say, I want to do the piece attribute values by the attribute rock, now it will only take the connected pieces and make each connected piece into one work item. So in this case, there's 40 rocks. It will create 40 work items. No need for a partition by attribute anymore. You go straight to your ROP geometry node and just save it out. Yes, you got to still do that centering. So you jump into your ROP geometry input, and I'll just show it here. I didn't run it. I'll run it a little later. But all you do is you have your incoming, which is set by default. And the key thing here is I just put a transform, $X max, Z max, just like you're used to. If I want to do some high detail, poly VDBs, I did that with a switch and output. So I probably could go here and say, hopefully this will work. Go up and try a dirty and cook. And it looks like it's working just fine. And I should have a geometry node somewhere here. I just did this on the desktop. Let's see if I can find it for you. There's 40 of them. And let's just grab something and say open with other applications, Houdini, utilities, geometry viewer. I bet you all it won't open up initially, and I'll have to do this again, but hey. Yep, file, open, desktop, geo, grab something, and there's our rock element. Hope you enjoyed the quick tip. Thank you for listening.